Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to our Delgado Community College for this most important event today, where we're going to provide information certainly on an issue that we know plays out within our region, but also across our nation and our globe, and that is the impact of human trafficking and what we can do to put a stop to it. I serve as interim chancellor of Delgado Community College, and I cannot give enough thanks to Dr. Cozy and to our student affairs team and our Student Government Association for bringing this most important topic to our college today. I want to certainly thank our panel for their investment of time, but also their unyielding day in and day out efforts to put a stop to this issue that is certainly plaguing our region. We all know the power of education. We know the power of training, the dignity of work. A lot of our mission has everything to do with the success in putting a stop to human trafficking. So I look forward to learning with you today more about human trafficking, and most importantly, learning about the real truths, the hard truths about it that we must address to solve the problem and go forward. So thank you all for joining us today. Look forward to a great program. Thank you.
That's my boss, y'all. Help me out. Yes.
Many people think that sex trafficking only happens in other countries, but it actually happens in the United States. In our neighborhoods.
I'm not here.
On our streets.
No, it doesn't.
By U.S. law, any child bought or sold in the sex trade is a victim of human trafficking.
Why have I never heard about this before?
On the same websites where you sell a couch, there are sections for buying people.
I could see that.
An abuser might try to isolate a victim and keep them away from their friends.
That would never happen to me.
And I don't want you to think that this is just about girls. Up to half of these victims can be boys.
I wouldn't do that.
There's no such thing as a child prostitute, just a victim of exploitation. And it could be anyone.
She's talking about me. He told me not to tell anyone. Should I say something?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let me first start by thanking my boss, Dr. William Wainwright, who is a man who every day demonstrates an unparalleled commitment to students and to student success, for his support and for allowing us to have this event today. I want to also thank you for attending Delgado Community College's Human Trafficking Symposium. I am Arnell Cozy, Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs and the Executive Dean for the City Park campus. There is no doubt that some of you may have the same sentiments and thoughts as those expressed in the video we just watched. While for some of you, this may be an introduction to human trafficking and the first time that you will hear about the issue. But there are others with some level of familiarity with the subject, either through their work or as one who has been directly or indirectly affected by it in some personal way. I can tell you all that human trafficking is real and is happening in front of us every day. We are fortunate to have an esteemed panel of experts with us this morning to shed some light and give their insights on what is being described as modern-day slavery. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the sensitivity of this subject and ask that we be mindful there may be individuals who will experience some level of personal trauma as a result of the dialogue this morning. We have considered that as a possibility and have invited our partners from the Daughters of Charity Health Centers to be available for one-on-one sessions, personal and confidential, during or after this session. These trained individuals are here now and available in this building in room 115 East. You can get to it by entering the theater, making a left, and it's the last office on your right-hand side. I should also inform Delgado faculty, staff, and students that as our partners, Daughters of Charity are available for all of us on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and they're located in Building 2, Room 306 here on the City Park campus. Following the introductions this morning that I'll do in just a second, each panelist will offer an opening statement. Following their statements, the panelists will respond to questions that have been provided to us from Delgado students, faculty, or staff. We've also reserved just a little time in case the audience has questions. If you did not receive a form when you came in, we will make them available to you throughout the session, and we will allow questions to be submitted for us to ask the panel up until 10:50 this morning. Finally, in closing, the panelists will have the opportunity to offer their closing thoughts, followed by Commissioner Lombard's final remarks. We are aware that some of you may need to leave for class and that others will be coming in during the symposium from class. We only ask that you do it as quietly and orderly as possible. I also want to thank all of the organizations that are in our lobby tabling and providing written information to us, and ask that you spend a little time stopping by on your way out. Those organizations include the Eden House, the Jewish Family Service, the Greater New Orleans Human Trafficking Task Force, STAR, Catholic Charities, and the New Orleans Family Justice Center. They were organized by our friend and our partner in the community, Ms. Leanne McCallum, and we want to thank her as well. So without any further delay, I present our panelists. First, a New Orleans native, Commissioner Juana Lombok, and an honored graduate of Loyola University, where she earned an MBA and a Juris Doctorate. For 4 years, she served as Criminal Magistrate Commissioner for Orleans Parish on the City of New Orleans' Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. In 2016, Governor John Bell Edwards appointed her to serve as Commissioner of the Louisiana Office of Alcohol and Tobacco Control, and under her leadership, she is responsible for the interpretation and enforcement of the laws as it relates to the production, distribution, and retailing prevention of access to alcohol and tobacco to underage persons. The governor has also appointed Commissioner Lombard to serve on numerous task forces and committees whose missions are the protection of children and the prevention of human trafficking concerns. Commissioner Lombard is taking an active stance to end human trafficking in licensed venues and has been successful in raising awareness in the community with her team by enforcing a statewide awareness campaign. She also hopes to increase awareness by providing informative programs such as this one to casinos, large hotels, schools, colleges, and universities. She is married to Darren Lombard, and they are the proud parents of 5 children. Commissioner Lombard.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Causey and the Delgado community for putting this event together and for welcoming me and all the other panelists to be here this morning. I am excited and thrilled by the turnout this morning. We have been doing this probably for about 18 months, and guys, I can honestly say we have had times where we put together a program and go into a room and there's only 20 people there. The fact that this room is so packed today inspires me because it lets me know that in general the message is getting out and people are at least understanding that human trafficking exists and that you guys are here wanting to know more about it. And that is actually the purpose of the awareness program. It's to touch, I figure if we can touch one person and that one person can recognize a sign, make a call, talk to a young girl or a young boy, call the school counselor, call the casino police. If we save one person from somebody in this room, then I feel that, and I'm sure Ms. Causey feels that this program today was well worth it. A lot of people wonder why ATC got involved in the fight against human trafficking. And quite frankly, I'll tell you, it was not something that I knew about. It was not something I jumped up to do. Honestly, I got involved because I didn't answer the request for an interview one day. So the press was running a story about human trafficking in the French Quarters. And pretty much all the other law enforcement agencies answered the interview, apparently, and I did not. So I wake up one morning and I read an article that pretty much blames ATC for all the trafficking going through strip clubs in the French Quarters. It was not funny at the time. However, it caused me and my boss to sit down and have a talk. So the governor, John Bell Edwards, and the first lady are very passionate about human trafficking. They're very committed to human trafficking. And prior to this article, they had already traveled to Rome, they had traveled abroad, they were already working with people internationally to try to stop and prevent human trafficking. We had already learned that that Louisiana, believe it or not, is one of the major trafficking corridors. We had learned things that, like the fact that 80% of the trafficking victims in the United States are actually American citizens being trafficked by other American citizens. The governor had learned that we, as in this state, were a prime target for trafficking for multiple reasons, because we have a farming community, which is where labor trafficking can bloom. We have a strip club community, which is where sex trafficking can bloom. We have a French Quarter. We are a tourist port, and therefore we often inspire and actually entice people in the trafficking industry to bring their victims here and use our big events as a means to make money. So when this happened, he called me and I said, Governor, this isn't really part of my wheelhouse, part of my job description, to be honest with you. And he said, I know. He said, but the First Lady is really passionate about this one. The more you learn, the more you're going to see. We all need to be involved in the fight at any level. He's like, you've got Kevin Reeves, the Colonel of State Police there. He's right next to you. He'll back you up however you need him. Go do whatever you can do. You've got my support. So I created a human trafficking task force. I pulled some people that were former NOPD that had been in, narcotics and vice, and told them, create this task force, go see what's going on in the bars and the strip clubs, do what you have to do. Ironically, it's my task force that started educating me. As I started sending them out to trainings, they started coming back going, Commissioner, look at this, Commissioner, look at that. And I started going, wait a minute, this is way deeper and way more problematic than I thought. We put together an interagency sweep in the French Quarter about a year ago. It was us, State Police, and NOPD. After that sweep, we caught a lot of attention, but what we also started getting then was phone calls, tip after tip. Some of them in bars, some of them not in bars. What started troubling me the most, though, is I started getting calls from people I knew. And I started hearing stories about children in high schools, private high schools in New Orleans, private high schools around the state. I started hearing stories about people in colleges. Big colleges, the Catholic colleges, the big state universities. I started having people at the state universities tell me, we ran some people off campus. We really think we have pimps on campus. And it started to chill me, because I started to realize that these children looked like my children, and many of these parents looked just like me. You think human trafficking is the movie Taken, and that was what it was years ago. You think it's the runaway that ends up as a prostitute, and don't get me wrong, that is still a large part of the victimology, but it is all around us. It is right under our noses. It could be your daughter's friends. It could be people that your daughter is in school with, or your son. It could be happening on this campus, because trust me when I say it is happening on campuses around the state. And as a mother, that's your biggest fear. You do everything right. You put them through high school. You send them off to college. You're writing checks to a college, and you find out your child's been caught up in a trafficking ring. That would be like a parent's worst nightmare. But the more I started watching, the more I started listening, I also started realizing that the one common factor in trafficking victims today is not your socioeconomic background. It is that these traffickers are almost psychologists, and they prey on the weak. They prey on a girl's insecurities. They prey on her isolation. They prey on her need for money. Sometimes they prey on your family rearing. Once they get a girl that comes from a good background, they tell them things like, now that you've done this, you can never go back home. What man is going to want to marry you? Your parents are never going to accept you now that they know what you did. Sometimes they prey on their love for their parents by threatening their parents. And when I realized that we had another attack, another prone of attack that we had to address. It's not just what the Enforcement Division does. Our Enforcement Division now works closely with a number of other divisions, the FBI, the State Police, the NOPD, the Shreveport PD, the Baton Rouge PD. They all go out and fight the fight on the streets. That's their job, and they're doing the best that they can at it, and they're getting better at it every day. But in order to stop it, it's just like domestic abuse. It's just like drug abuse. It's just like opioid abuse. Until the general public wakes up and realizes that this is a problem and that it might be happening in the seat right next to me, we are never going to stop it, because enforcement divisions can only combat it after the fact. They can raid somewhere and they can save the victims. My goal with my awareness program is to get us to the point where the teachers and the counselors and the students and the friends are saving the victims before ATC and State Police and NOPD and FBI have to go in and physically pull them out somewhere. Before they have to arrest the pimp, my goal is that someday we will be educated enough that we can stop that girl before she gets in his clutches. Or that boy, because they are trading men today just like they're trading women. One of the things that, as I said, was my real wake-up call was when I started getting the phone calls about private high schools and intelligent children. One of the stories that sticks with me is a girl here in the state of Louisiana. She's the president of the Student Government Association, straight A student, popular student, and went out, got drunk at a party, got compromised, got some video out there. From that, they held that video over her, blackmailed her into doing other things, and eventually had her basically running a small prostitution ring within the high school. And it's just how easy it can happen, because the first video they started saying, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, I'll show this to your principal, I'll show this to your parents, you're gonna get kicked out of school. But by the end, she was running a prostitution ring within the school, and they had videos on all of her girls. But these were her friends. She went down the rabbit hole, and she pulled some of her closest friends down the rabbit hole with them. All the while, they were going home every day, living in upper middle class houses, and their parents had absolutely no clue of what was going on with their children. The other thing that was a wake-up call for me is that I was a criminal court magistrate for 5.5 years. And therefore, I saw a number of prostitution victims come through the courts. I actually used to get annoyed, because if you're in the criminal justice system in Louisiana, especially in New Orleans, for big events, we become everybody else's dumping pot. The drug dealers come in, they come in from Texas, and they hole up in a hotel room in the French Quarter with all their drugs. The pimps come in and they bring their prostitutes in. They bring girls in to strip that don't reside here. They just come in to strip for the big events. You name it, all the criminal activity comes to New Orleans for the big events. And one of the things I used to see all the time was the gun charges, the robberies, the drug charges, and I used to sign the warrants as well, and the prostitution arrest. Well, quite frankly, it annoyed me. I used to say, why are these girls always coming in from Tennessee and Florida, to prostitute in New Orleans for Super Bowl, for Sugar Bowl, for whatever? Now that I got in it and I started understanding the complexity of it, what I now realize is all those girls that I was setting bonds on higher because they were from out of state, those girls were probably victims, because that is the MO of a trafficker, to bring their crew in for a big event, use those girls up here, and then bring them back home. All that time, I was annoyed with these girls. These were 19, 20-year-olds, pretty girls, intelligent girls, well-spoken. They were probably being trafficked, and I not only did not help them because I didn't know the signs, I feel like I punished them. So those are the two things that have been the wake-up call for me. Those are the two things that have caused me to create this awareness program. And Classic, we did a program for the Links a couple months ago. Candice Anderson was there, Juanita was there, a number of the panelists here were there. And from that program, Dr. Cozy decided, hey, we need to do this at Delgado. We need to have this at our school. And that is what we want to happen. We want people to look at these programs and say, we need to do this, we need to get this to more people. I have a video that I want to show you because I do want you to understand that it is no longer just a runaway girl, and this is a true survivor. And I know that a number of you can look at this girl and see yourself in her, because I know I look at her and I see myself, and we won't talk about how many years ago, we're just going to say a couple decades ago, I see myself, but right now I see my children. Can he get it? Okay.
My name is Rachel Thomas. I'm from Pasadena. Any Dina? Hey, always in the house. We got a whole table back there. I'm gonna make my way over there. And I'm from a wonderful upper middle class 2-parent home. My mother's a lawyer. My dad's a church deacon. She went to UCLA. He went to USC, so they call it a mixed marriage. And I never experienced any form of abuse in my home. My parents have been married for over 30 years, and I've never even seen them have an argument in front of me. So, compared to many of the stories we've heard tonight, I had a perfect childhood almost, all-American dream. I went to high school, and I played volleyball, and I ran track, and I was voted prom queen, and I worked really hard, and I got into the university of my choice, which was Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was there in my junior year. I had just turned 20 years old when I met a man. And I was at a popular hangout, college lounge with my friends, and he came up to me on the dance floor, and he said, "You are gorgeous. Has anyone ever told you you should be a model?" And so I'm like, hey, well, I was flattered, but I had heard it before from a guy representing John Robert Powers, and I decided not to go that route. And I was in school to be a teacher, and I was almost a senior, so I said thanks, but no thanks. And fast forwarding a little bit, he ended up convincing me that night, because he then had another model come and approach me on the dance floor again and reiterate how beautiful I was and how she worked with this guy named Mike, and he's the best in the city and that he can jumpstart my career. So I gave him a try. The very next weekend, we did the first photo shoot. By week 2, he had gotten me a paid modeling gig and asked me to fill out a W-9. On the W-9, which I had filled out before because I worked at the Y in high school, I put on there my full name, my permanent address, which is my parents' home address in Pasadena, my current address where I was living in Atlanta with my best friend and roommate, my social security number, and a slew of other information. And I handed Mike the W-9, assuming he would hand it to the casting director and I'd receive a check in the mail. By the third week, Mike called again with an exciting opportunity to audition for a major magazine in New York. And he asked me if I wanted to go, and I said, of course I want to go, I'm ready. And he said, okay, good. Do you have about $400 for the flight and hotel? I'm like, no, I don't have $400 lying around. I'm a broke college student, but my parents are kind of rich. Let me call them. But before I can get off the phone, he said, no, actually, you know what? By the time you have the taxis to and from the audition place, and you get your hair and your makeup done, and this is a big audition, so you probably want to buy a new outfit. It's probably going to be more like $750, $800. You think your parents will give you that? I knew they weren't going to give me $750 or $800 to go on some New York weekend audition. And so I sounded pretty disappointed. And he said, well, you know what? That's okay, because you can do what some of my other models do, which is become an exotic dancer. And I said, a stripper? No, I would never do that, never. And he said, well, you know what? A lot of actresses and models got their start in the strip club, and he named a few. And he said, you know, the night I met you, you were dancing on the dance floor, and I'm pretty sure that when you go to the pool or the beach, you're in a bikini. And I noticed that when you had that photo shoot, your face looked a little tense, and you didn't quite know where to place your arm sometimes, so I think that it might actually be a good thing for you to get some experience being the center of attention. I don't know what you know about strip clubs or what fantasies are in your mind, but it's really just a big room with a bunch of admirers going to see beauty. It's a form of beauty. And in about 30 minutes, he painted this glorious picture, as Harmony was talking about, and something didn't feel right in my spirit, but he made it sound good. And some of my favorite music artists had just shot their music videos in a strip club, and it looked like a lot of fun. So I decided to try it out to jumpstart my modeling career. Just raise enough money for a little while and then quit. By the 4th week, I signed a contract with his agency, and then by the 5th week is when he became violent, when I first saw him hit another girl. After I saw him hit the other model for a tiny offense, I realized that this may not be a good situation. And so after the night where he hit the other model, I somehow made it through without a nervous breakdown. And the next morning, in my sweetest voice, I called and I said, you know what, Mike, finals are coming up and it's getting so hard for me to juggle school and modeling, and you know, you've been a great help thus far, but I'm just going to put everything on hold now, and I'll give you a call later if I want to pick back up. Thanks, but no thanks. And he was silent for a moment, and then he said, bitch, I own you. You're going to do what I tell you to do, or somebody's going to get hurt. And then he read off my parents' home address. And before I could even process what was going on, he said, you better go to work tonight. And then he hung up.
And it's just that easy. And it's that easy to catch someone who has a background. So now you have to imagine the most vulnerable among us, the children who come from the broken family, the children whose family just don't care, the children whose family tells them, you're 18, you're on your own now, you're not our responsibility anymore. If it's that easy to catch the girl, and she's a real victim, by the way, to catch the girl that had it all, imagine the children that need us the most, that already have no support system. Imagine how easy it is for a trafficker to pull them in and ruin their life forever. Thank you for listening to me. Now I'd like you to listen to the panel, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that introduction. Now, before we begin with the questions, I'd like to introduce our other panelists. Judge Candice Bates Anderson graduated cum laude from Clark Atlanta University, where she was named one of the who's who in colleges and universities. She then moved back to New Orleans and graduated from Tulane University School of Law and began her legal career as a judicial law clerk. Judge Anderson also gained tremendous trial experience in the Orleans Parish court system. Prior to Katrina, she was an in-house attorney for the Regional Transit Authority and the Housing Authority of New Orleans, as well as a partner in the law firm of Anderson and Darrensburg, where she handled personal litigation issues. She was elected as Chief Judge for Orleans Parish Juvenile Court in 2015 and remains in that seat today. In addition to her service as Chief Judge, she is a current member of several organizations, such as the New Orleans Association of Women Judges and the Louisiana Human Trafficking Prevention Commission and Advisory Board. In 2017, she was named a Fellow of the Norman C. Francis Leadership Institute by the Louisiana Bar Foundation. In addition to her professional affiliations, the judge also serves her community through membership in organizations such as Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Pontchartrain chapter of the Lynx Incorporated, and the historic Faubourg Neighborhood Association. She is the devoted wife of Aaron Anderson III and the proud mother of 3 girls. Judge Anderson. Leonard Corolla, Agent Corolla, has been an FBI special agent since 2002 and has been assigned to the New Orleans field office since 2007. For the past 2 years, he has been the supervisor of the FBI New Orleans Child Exploitation Task Force with investigative oversight for violent crimes against children and human trafficking. Juanita Carruth. Born and raised in New Orleans, Juanita is a fearless mother of 3 daughters, She learned firsthand of the horrors of human trafficking when her daughter became a victim at 13 years old of this heinous crime. After educating herself on the issue by attending human trafficking trainings and meeting with professionals in the community, she learned about the realities and misconceptions around human trafficking in her community. Juanita would like to assist others affected by serving as an advocate and a voice for those who are voiceless. She shares her story to help individuals understand that children from loving, two-parent households can become victims of human trafficking and that it affects entire families and therefore entire communities. Ms. Carruth is here to urge us to come together as a community to combat human trafficking and to prevent it from happening to other children. Dr. Robin Chapman is a licensed clinical social worker. She serves as the Victim Assistance Specialist for Homeland Security Investigations. Her responsibilities include coordination and monitoring of victim assistance activities within her area of responsibility that includes Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Dr. Chapman has primarily been engaged in cases pertaining to human trafficking and child exploitation involving multi-level law enforcement agencies and partnerships with service providers. She came to HSI in December 2010 with 14 years of experience as a therapist in the areas of corrections, chronic mental illness, and with victims of abuse and trauma. Her personal philosophy is patterned after a quote by Gandhi: "Be the change you want to see in the world." It is this philosophy that serves as motivation and the driving force for her to be a catalyst for positive change within the lives of those she serves. As a former Covenant House resident 27 years ago, Sherry Lockridge first returned as a volunteer, but quickly hired as a resident advisor in the crisis department. Today, Sherry heads the human trafficking team as the lead case manager, providing support to 218 human trafficking victims over the past 2 years. She works with the support of local, state, and federal law enforcement to identify cases of human trafficking. She is trained in child forensic interviews through the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children. Sherry recently participated in a year-long undercover investigation written by the Times-Picayune entitled The Track. She has shared her knowledge of human trafficking throughout the New Orleans area, presenting to health and human service professionals, law enforcement, and community church groups. And we're certainly grateful to have her with us today. Thank you, Sherry. Dr. Desiree Morel Carter is on the front lines of the mental health crisis in New Orleans. She has treated mental health patients in the emergency room of University Medical Center for the past 10 years. She also specializes in psychiatric telemedicine, treating patients remotely with the use of developing technology and in coordination with LSU and local medical staff in Livingston, Tangipahoa, and Terrebonne parishes. She is an assistant professor and educator of LSU Health Science Center medical students, physician assistant students, and psychiatry residents. And as if she is not busy enough, Dr. Carter has maintained a clinical practice since 2011, treating those with mental health disorders. Born and raised in New Orleans, Dr. Carter graduated from McMain High School and earned her Bachelor of Science in Biology from XU. She graduated from LSU Medical Center and completed her residency in psychiatry from LSU Ochsner of New Orleans. After residency, Dr. Carter was an adult inpatient psychiatrist for the New Orleans Adolescent Hospital, a psychiatrist with the Assertive Community Treatment Team, and interim director of Ed Psychiatry at ILH. Desiree Morel Carter is married to Louisiana State Representative Gary Carter Jr. and the mother of 3. She is also a co-founder of the Carter Morel Foundation, a member of the Links Incorporated, and a member of LSU Health Sciences Center Women's Affairs Committees. Is that my panel? Yes. Woo! Take a drink of water. All right. So now we're going to get started with the questions that were prepared and provided to us in advance. If I can get to them, give me just a second. Not good when you lose your order. Here we go. Thank you for your patience. Going to start with some general information here, and this question is directed to Agent Corolla and Dr. Chapman, but certainly any of the panelists should feel free to chime in. Share with us the demographics, age, race, socioeconomic status of the victims, of trafficking victims.
Thank you. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Cozy and Dr. Rainwhite and Delgado for this opportunity to share with you information with regards to human trafficking, and I'm honored to share this panel with such esteemed panelists. The demographics that we have seen with regards to human trafficking, I guess you can say that we have seen the gamut. We've seen male, female, we've seen African American, we've seen Caucasian, we've seen those who are foreign nationals from various South American, Central American countries, as well as Eastern European countries. They've ranged in age, so basically we have seen, there's no particular demographic that we have seen. We've seen those who have run the gamut.
Thank you as well, Dr. Cozy, for inviting me here today. And I'll just echo what Dr. Chapman said. The demographics for victims could be anyone. There is no race, there is no ethnicity, there is no gender, there is no age that makes someone the ideal victim for human trafficking. Anyone can become a victim, and I think the most important thing is to educate the public to be aware of that specific comment that anyone can become a victim, and that really it all goes back to vulnerabilities. I think Commissioner Lombard mentioned it earlier, and that's what it is. It goes back to the pimps are psychopaths, and they're able to prey upon victims and their vulnerabilities.
I just realized that I jumped to the questions without the opening statements, so forgive me for that. And I'm going to go back to the opening statements. Dr. Carter, can we start with you?
Sure. So human trafficking for me wasn't as big of a reality until I started seeing multiple victims in the emergency room. So, for a while you hear about the big crises, all over the country. And then, it gets closer and closer to home once you've actually spoken to a victim, and that's what happened in my case. And so I spoke to this one victim who gave me the details. Mostly, when I interview patients, I spend about 30 minutes at most talking with them in the emergency room because things have to happen pretty fast and decisions have to be made. But I spent over an hour with this one individual who fit the perfect picture that Commissioner mentioned, and in the video of the young lady, in which it became very concerning because then you start to see yourself, you see your children, you see this happening to anyone. And so at that point I decided that the best thing that I can do is to educate, and to educate those who could be those who are identifiers. People, for instance, like doctors and nurses in my field, who these victims present to without thinking that they're presenting as a victim. So they come for other reasons. And so we have to teach, or I have to teach, or others have to be taught how to identify those victims in those settings so that we can provide help. And so I feel that that's my role, and that's why I wanted to play a bigger role, a bigger part in helping those in the public become more aware, as well as educating those who can become identifiers to victims.
Thank you.
Good morning. So I want to update that too, regarding 218 victims, it's 234. And why that number matters so much, why that number matters is because each and every one of those victims, those survivors, had a story. My passion for human trafficking is from my own history, is from my youth when I was a chronic running away from a broken foster care system and being on the street selling sex to survive. And seeing how and feeling how and knowing how easy it is for your spirit, your sense of dignity, your self-respect to be destroyed by men that come in and use your body any way they choose to. In the victims, when we talk about demographics, I have worked with as young as 12 years old all the way up to 38 years old. And they've been all gender, and they've had all sexual orientations. If there's a vulnerability, there's a way for them to be preyed upon. Their stories matter. Their survivorship matters. When we talk about victimization, it comes from a criminal element. But for the person that went through that ordeal, they are a survivor. When we do these awareness, it's in hopes that we dispel some of the myths. It's in hopes that we create an open forum where people feel safe, where they know how to reach out for help, or if they have somebody that they know is going through that situation, that they know that there's partnerships in service advocates and law enforcement that is there with open doors and willing to help them through their traumatic event or work through the legal system. These kids matter, these young adults matter, these people matter, because in 2019, we should not still be selling human beings.
So as Dr. Cozy mentioned earlier, I supervise the Child Exploitation Task Force for the FBI here in New Orleans. And what that means is we investigate all violent crimes against children, as well as human trafficking of both children and adult victims at the federal level. And what I hope we can convey today to you is that it's not just something that law enforcement battles, it's something that we have to battle together. And that's why we have a panel like this, where we have people from not just law enforcement, but we have people from service providers, we have victim advocates, we have the legal system with Judge Bates here. This is a multi-dimensional task force, multidisciplinary task force. And the one thing about human trafficking that's different from any other criminal investigation that I've ever worked is it's victim focused. And what's important about that is, for example, like a bank robbery, our job in law enforcement is to find the bank robber and put him or her in prison. But with human trafficking, what we focus first on is the victim. What can we do to help that victim? We address physical needs, we address emotional needs, psychological needs, and we all work together for that. So I hope that's something that we can convey to you today, and I hope that's something that if your questions aren't answered, you can address those as well.
So Homeland Security Investigations is a federal law enforcement agency, and one of the crimes we investigate is human trafficking. And our focus tends to be those goods, services, people that impact the border. So we are a part of ICE. So we look at those crimes or those investigations that may have an international nexus, whether or not the victim, him or herself, is a foreign national, or the person who is perpetrating the crime is a foreign national. It's my role as victim assistance specialist is to support our agents in investigations by providing assistance to the individuals, the victims that we encounter. We work collaboratively with other law enforcement agencies as well as our NGO partners, our non-governmental organizations, who provide the ongoing support and assistance to the victims that we encounter. My role is also to provide as much information prior to any type of enforcement action, such as issuing an arrest or search warrant. and that we have to take into consideration the potential of encountering a victim. We have to take into consideration whether or not we may encounter 1 victim, 10 victims, or 100 victims. Whether those victims are foreign national, whether or not they speak English, whether or not they're U.S. citizens, whether or not they are juveniles, adults, older adults, because it's a matter of also referring those individuals to appropriate services, and no one agency provides services to all victims. So it's a matter of also having a working knowledge of what sort of services are available. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Juanita Carruth. Thank you, Dr. Cozy, for having me. Thank you, Delgado, for allowing this panel of experts to answer any questions. First and foremost, for myself, I am a mother of a survivor. My daughter was 13 when she became a victim, and I listened to this panel talk about all the experience that they have, and well, I appreciate that knowledge. But for myself, it's pretty difficult only because my daughter became the victim, and it's kind of a difference when you actually experience your own child in this situation. And everybody have the working experience, but I have the actual experience of a family being affected by the situation. My family was extorted. My family was demeaned. We were degraded through this whole process. And for myself, I done put myself in so many dangerous situations, literally trying to save my daughter when people failed me. But I'm not here today to talk about the failures. I want a solution, and that is my goal, is to educate, to bring awareness to our communities, because our communities are being ripped apart by this situation. And someone, interestingly enough, asked me, how do I like my profession? And if I can be frank or candid about it, I told them that I hate it. I said I hate it only because I was chosen for this. I wouldn't have never picked this. I'm a people's person, and I believe in trying to save these lives, but this wasn't a role that I wanted. But I took this role on, and I'm ready to fight fiercely for anyone that don't have a voice in this situation, because it is serious. It's very serious, and I take it extremely to heart. And for everybody that may have someone that's gone through this situation, it's time to talk. It's time to do something about it. And I'm most definitely going to hold my panel accountable in the sense of we all are here and we want to bring awareness. And this is what's so great about this situation, because they really get to see, not from just experience, the actual work experience, but from some people that actually been in those situations. And I can tell you, it's such a dangerous situation. It's tiring, it's overwhelming, and I'm being judged. I was crucified. People asked, how can you let this happen? Why your daughter did this? And it was just so many different questions, and I had to stand up fiercely. But at times I want to ball up like a fetus because I was being degraded. It was so many things that was being said about my family. We was under so much scrutiny because of the things that someone else did to our daughter. So today, like I said again, I'm here to bring awareness and educate, and also form relationships with these people, because they are very important. They're on the front line of trying to bring awareness, but they need our community, myself, other parents, our neighborhoods to really take this on head on. It's happening, you guys, and you have to know about it. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi, good morning. I would like to thank Dr. Cozy as well as Delgado. I am Candice Bates-Anderson, Chief Judge of Juvenile Court here in New Orleans. Once the kids come in front of me, that's when the term victim changes to delinquent, to juvenile offender, to a person who has committed a crime. So the first thing that I would hope today's panel would do, and the opportunity that the public would have, is that to bring awareness that these kids first off have to be thought of as victims. We talk about human trafficking victims, but once a child is arrested and detained and brought into the judicial system, they are starting to look at as delinquents. And that is something that we are trying to get away from. How do we first off allow these children to identify that they have been victimized? How do I, as the judge, say that we need to give these children an opportunity to have a voice about what they have been through? And the first thing they're doing is they're coming in front of me in handcuffs. The first thing that they're doing is they're coming in front of me after they have already been arrested by a police officer, after they've already been taken out of their home, after a warrant has already been signed. So the first thing that has to happen is that they need to stop coming to me. That's the first order that we are trying to do as a bench and as a court, to have the district attorney, as well as the police, as well as everybody that is involved, that we can look at these children for what they really are, a victim. Do you think that a young girl or a young boy would choose to be coerced into sexual acts? Do you think that a young girl or a young boy would choose to steal someone's car so that they could have an advantage of spending the night with them? So as a judge, I have to look at a totality of all the circumstances. If I have a case that comes in front of me, I have to not look at the fact that this child has been arrested for simple battery. This child has been arrested for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Very, very rarely do I have a child that is arrested for prostitution. Very rarely do I have a child that is brought in front of me for some type of act that would have them brought into human trafficking. They come in front of me disguised as all other types of crimes, all other types of delinquent acts. And so the first thing that we have to do as a bench is we have to be aware of what are some of the things that we have to look for. And that's where it's very important that people like yourself come involved, teachers, educators, social workers, therapists, police officers, doctors, because those are the people that are on the front line that are going to see those children before they ever have a chance to get to me. Once they are brought into the juvenile justice system, then my job is to uphold the law. So that means that the district attorney brings in a case that appears that a child has done something that has caused them to be brought in front of me, then I am supposed to, at that point, determine whether or not they are guilty or innocent of that offense. But how in the world is a child that is a victim of being trafficked supposed to trust me as a judge and come to me and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm a victim? First off, they don't even look at themselves very often as victims. A lot of times they're looking at themselves as this has happened, that's happened, trauma, other factors that have been involved. I've been caught up in other matters that have brought me into the system. They are not going to be forthcoming and tell me that person who you believe that's my uncle that's waiting to pick me up from the detention center, that's my pimp. They're not going to tell me that that person that is coming forward, that is going to argue on my behalf and ask for my release, that is my pimp's mother. They're not going to come forward and tell me that, you know, my mom that they're saying that they can't reach, and my mom that the defense lawyer is saying that they've had trouble getting in touch with is actually right down the block, and she's got a missing persons report that's been on the books for the past 2 months. So that's where all of us have to work together, and where the school systems and everybody has to get involved so that I have the entire picture in front of me. The problem is that once that picture is painted, that sometimes it's too late. I didn't even know when I got elected in 2010 what human trafficking was about. Like so many of you, I thought that human trafficking was somebody that was in the French Quarter, somebody that was on a corner, that was soliciting sex and selling sex, or somebody was putting them out in the community. I had no idea that children were being forced and coerced to do this against their will. I had no idea until a young lady started to come in front of me. First, she started to come for runaway, habitual runaway, family needed services case. Her mom needed help because she wouldn't follow the rules. That started with runaway. She started going back home, and then suddenly she comes in front of me for another offense. She's charged with theft from somebody's home. And when she came and the story was told and they presented the information to me, it just didn't make sense. Why was she in these people's home? Why was this man that was old enough to be her father coming to court with her? Why was this man's wife so angry with this child? Why was her own mother kept out of so many of the court proceedings? Unfortunately, we never got a chance to answer any of those questions because shortly thereafter, a day that she was supposed to appear in court, she didn't show up. Mom comes in, I'm not sure where she is. At that point, we issued an attachment for arrest, but unfortunately that night, her body was found scattered across the interstate of where she was thrown from a vehicle. So that was my first real slam of where this is really an epidemic, and there is so much more to this story. Did the mother come in and tell me we need help? Did the child come in and tell me, Judge, I'm a victim? I didn't know that story, but today I know it, and I can't let that story go. So that's why it is my objective, and as I sit on that bench, and as we are involved in this epidemic, this horrible, horrible thing that just has taken over our city, it is so prevalent and it is so in our faces and that we are not realizing just how often it's really happening. Because remember, the amount of victims that we're talking about are the people who actually come in and are able to say, I am a victim. But how many of those children do not have a voice? How many of those parents do not have an advocate? How many opportunities do we not have a chance to say, you know what? We're not going to arrest you. We're going to talk to you. We're going to ask you questions, and we're going to find out what trauma and what things are really going on in your life, and sometimes not many things at all. How have you been caught up that you have been brought into that system? Thank you.
We'll process that a little bit. So the first question that we have, or the next question that we have, I can pose to anyone, and I'll ask maybe two panelists to respond. Share with us some of the noticeable signs and symptoms of a victim who may be trafficked that may be around us here on campus.
So, some of the signs and symptoms that you, as classmates and teachers, can recognize is signs of physical abuse, sudden changes in personalities, abnormal behavior, changes in the way they dress, going from a normally dressed college student to dressing more provocatively, to in general acting and behaving more sexually. One of the main things is going to be the anxious behavior and almost the inability to think for themselves. When you hear them, any little decision, they suddenly got to call the boyfriend or the uncle or the cousin before you, if you say, let's go such and such a place Friday night, and it's, oh, I've got to check with, they've always got someone else to check with. They may not even carry their own identification, and very often they do not, because that's one of a trafficker's biggest controls is they take everything. So they may be right here on campus, and that trafficker, that boyfriend, may always be lingering around. Got to pick them up from class, got to wait in the back of the class, got to wait in the cafeteria while they're in class. Those are some of the signs of someone that is being controlled and sitting right next to you.
Anyone else?
Excess amounts of cash, stories that just don't add up. And just like Juana said, change in appearance, suddenly withdrawn, involved in criminal activity that really just doesn't add up, different types of vehicles, cell phones that they've got a number but they can't give you the number but you can reach them. I mean, it's just a lot of things. If it doesn't add up and there's something that has you concerned, just ask questions. A lot of times they're afraid to talk. Being in certain environments of where it doesn't really make sense. Why is this person on campus with them? Why is this person holding their books? Why is this person waiting in the vehicle? A lot of time that they are not given independent time with you. Inability to join study groups, inability to reach out after class. And some of those are some of the factors that you can start to look at.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this next question from two varying sides, as Juanita said when she did her opening remarks, and that is, what can parents do to inform and protect their children from being victims? I want to ask Ms. Carruth to answer first, and then I'd like Agent Corolla to respond.
First, what we can do as parents, I know it's a bit difficult because I found it difficult for myself. I noticed the signs very early on with my daughter. I think she was maybe around 9. And I want to say something the judge said, especially with the schools. Sometimes I don't know, and correct me, panel, if I'm wrong, but with the schools that I found out that they don't really want to deal with the conflict. And I started noticing behaviors with my daughter. She was 9 years old. And I'm going to be a little graphic. There was an instance where my daughter was introduced to pornographic videos at 9 years old. And from there, it spiraled out of control. And when she turned 11, she was first introduced to prostitution by a friend, a family, almost friend type person, and they were soliciting sex through social media via Instagram. And so when all these things start to happen, I put my daughter through their therapy. She was getting therapy twice a week. And when I noticed that wasn't working, I would make sure that she have counseling at school. Counselor come to the home, and it started to get worse. I even called DCFS on myself. to figure out if there's any solutions, any resources, and we always run into this problem that, oh, there's lack of funding. We want to help, but there's lack of funding, and that's what irritates me. That's the most annoying thing. You say you want to help with your mouth, but your actions say, oh, we don't have the funding. That bothers me, because I am a parent that is trying to do everything in my power. I was literally ready to go paint the city of New Orleans red to save my daughter's life. Now, if that would mean to get their attention to do that, and talk about suicide, that's how I felt. I felt suicidal, that I didn't care. I wanted to save her, if that meant taking my own life, to save her. And a lot of people don't realize that's what's important, because you think it's just the child, it's the parents that's also victims, because I am trying to save her, but I have everybody telling me we don't have funding or we don't have resources. And for me to call DCFS on myself, that should tell you that I don't have anything to hide. I welcome the investigation. And another thing, we have to hold our school accountable. I got a lot of people that want to go into the schools and train, but we have not gotten a response from Orleans Parish School Board to try to bring this into our schools. And I have teachers that's asking me to do presentations, but I'm getting pushback because nobody wants to deal with that situation. And I know it's difficult, but we have to see it. It started at school for my daughter. They said it started at home. It didn't start at home, it started at school. My daughter was introduced to porn at school at 9.
Thank
So
you.
it's a lot of things.
Thank you, Juanita. Agent Corolla?
I think the biggest thing, and when I talk to parent groups, is to talk to your kids on a daily basis, know everything about them, know all about their friends. If they're on social media, be friends with them on social media, see what they're doing. If they have a phone, go through their phone every opportunity you get. This is not just a recommendation from a human trafficking standpoint, but we deal with a lot of kids that get caught up in situations where they end up sending pictures of people and producing child pornography. And so what I tell parents is, go through their phones, find out everything you can about the types of social media they're using, and learn about all the security features so you can teach your kids about those security features, and then all the privacy settings as well. But most importantly is talk to your kids.
Thank you.
Can I do a rebuttal?
Yeah.
I want to kind of add on to what you were saying. My daughter didn't have a cell phone, so what she would use her friend's cell phones at school. And me and her used to fight about those things, and this is why she became that victim, because she was using other people's phones. And it was like, well, how you let a 12-year-old do these things? It wasn't that I was letting her. It was happening whether I wanted it to happen or not. So she didn't have a phone. Let me just reiterate, kids don't have to have a phone. They can use anybody's phone. They can use any of our phones up here, and you would never know what the kids are doing.
Thank you. Ms. Combs, what potential factors are most relevant to recruitment and keeping a person trafficked in servitude?
So there's a number of vulnerabilities. It's not just age, it's not the financial situation, and there's a number of vulnerabilities: mental health, substance abuse, homeless youth. We know, me working at a homeless shelter, I have seen suspected pimps lurking around and looking at the young women and young men there as potentials. So there's just a number of vulnerability. I would say when I am talking to my young ladies and men, and I have kept track of a lot of childhood history, over 90% of the survivors I've worked with have had some sort of childhood sexual abuse. Over 80% have had some sort of physical, emotional abuse. And whether it be introduced during the trafficking or prior to the trafficking, over 75% have some sort of substance abuse. Now, traffickers often lead their victims to addiction by providing methamphetamines, cocaine, uppers to keep them awake, because they have quotas generally to make. And you're not permitted to sleep. It's not unheard of for girls or boys to have to go several days without sleeping or any sort of nutrition before they make that quota. It's not a choice anymore. So there's many vulnerabilities. When you fear for your life it is not hard to understand how they stay with these traffickers. When you're going through severe abuse, when you're going through severe neglect, you've lost contact with your family, your support system, your friends, and that's the sole person you have to rely on. You're going to acclimate, Stockholm Syndrome. You're going to start to do whatever you need to do to survive that situation. And I think Ms. Carruth mentioned how she's gone under extreme interrogation. How could you let this happen? But you see, that's a major factor in why people don't speak out and speak up, victim blaming and shaming. And we have to stop doing that.
Thank you. Drs. Carter and Chapman, if you can speak from your perspectives about the additional efforts that are being made to educate the community.
I think from my perspective, working in the healthcare system, we're educating doctors and nurses and all healthcare professionals how to recognize victims who come into the emergency room or come to the hospital. Most victims don't go to scheduled appointments, regular clinical appointments and things like that. They come to the emergency room when something drastic has happened, severe beatings, urinary tract infections, things like that. Some come through because they're suicidal, but the majority of the ones that we see have some type of physical problem. And so if we're training nurses and physicians and other healthcare professionals how to recognize that, and some of the things that we teach how to recognize it, sort of those red flags. And that is, and some of the panelists have mentioned a few of these things, and that is not speaking for yourself, having someone there the entire time, not having your own communication, cell phone, whatever the case may be, not having your own identification, not being able to answer specific questions, simple questions. Where do you live? Who lives in the household? There's a list of questions that we can ask. Sometimes the victims are very vague on the answers that they give us, which is also a red flag. And then a lot of times from there, we can direct them where to go to get help. A lot of the victims, too, don't receive a lot of the resources that are available because they won't give information. So if they come in and we think they're a victim, but they don't want to speak to law enforcement, or they don't want to give you any information at all, we can just give them a list of resources. Here, this is where you can go. This is where you can get mental health, because it's a personal choice and you can't force them to do anything. But tell them that please come back if you need any additional services. But if they're willing to talk to law enforcement, there's a whole window of opportunity of resources that they can get: safe housing, other mental health resources for them. And the victims, we also educate the victims too, that you don't have to give detailed information like the pimp's name and where they're located, like simple little things that can help them build upon, because they probably already have information. Like a blue house uptown near this street gives them a lot of information. And so we try to educate them about that as well.
Thank you. Dr. Chapman?
Just to piggyback on some of the ways that Dr. Carter increases awareness. As the part of my role and the agency itself, we conduct awareness activities and events. We participate in events such as this that increases awareness. We have partnered with other community groups to hold awareness events so that we can share information on the indicators of trafficking. There's also, January is National Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month, so there's increased activity, particularly during that time, but as well as year-round. We also have within the agency what's called the Blue Campaign. That is our Department of Homeland Security department-wide awareness campaign, in which there are public notifications that you may see in transportation centers, whether it's an airport, bus station, train station. You may see billboards, you may see postings. Actually, there are postings along Loyola in which it asks if you see something to say something, and it provides a contact number in which you can call either the ICE tip line or the National Human Trafficking hotline to report a tip, and that information gets funneled to the appropriate law enforcement agency. So we participate in awareness events throughout the year.
Thank you.
Dr.
Yes.
Posey, can I follow up?
Yes.
Dr. Carter, I would respectfully disagree with the fact that even after my daughter became a victim, I remember this vividly, the detective that was working on the case. We were trying to get her positioned at a safe house, and I remember saying that, listen, we have this thing, she's gonna run away. And I was told that it was above his and his supervisor's pay grade. So there's not real true resources for these victims. Or after this happened, my daughter was willingly ready to testify, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna pull her from this case because who's gonna protect us? No one was willing to protect us. My husband and I did ask, can we uproot our life from New Orleans? So there is no true resources for these victims. This is why they're afraid to come forward. And you see this happen just with violence in the city of New Orleans all the time. So there is no true resources, and I'm here to tell you that from experience because I have experiences. There's no true resources, and that's why I'm in this position, and I'm ready to fight and do rebuttals if I have to on this panel because I have experienced this, I've watched this happen, and I'm looking at an agent that I work closely with, and she knows from experience that I asked for this. I was willing, but I'm not gonna risk my life if law enforcement is not gonna risk their lives to protect us from this. So that's the only way that I can do it. So there's no resources.
Thank you. The next question is...
I'm sorry, I just want to you know, and that's very unfortunate that your family had to go through such an ordeal for you to get your child help. And I believe, you know, from my perspective, it's with adults, adults who have been trafficked, and you know, they themselves make the decisions, and I'm sure, I'm uncertain for children, particularly, with their families have to go through. It's not just the child, it's the entire family, because you can't take a child away from entire family.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I do, I certainly do empathize with you for that. But a lot of the resources that I particularly was referring to was for those who are now adults.
Okay, thank you.
Who there are a lot of resources, but because they themselves make the decision and then they can go to the safe house themselves. They do not provide it for their entire family, but it's particularly an adult, 18 and over.
Okay,
and they decide, you know, these are the resources if you testify or if you want to help us with cases, and then they move them, in a lot of cases, out of state. And then there are some local places that they can go to as well. But that's particularly for adults who have been trafficked, which may have started as a child, which probably has started as a child.
Thank you.
Thank you both. The next question is for the judge and commissioner. How often do we see male victims, and what's the average age, and is the way that we deal with the male victims different from that of female victims?
We see female victims, I would say, far more often, or at least what we would label as a female victim. So a lot of times in juvenile court, we do not have kids that are coming forward and saying, I am being trafficked. We also see males, and I see that someone from the court is here that actually handles our rides docket, which is a docket that we've created to bring awareness and to try to combat some of human trafficking. And they remind me often that this affects both girls and boys. More often what I see are the girls because of the types of crimes that they are coming in on. In terms of when I have a domestic abuse battery, if I have a simple battery. The new thing that we're seeing a lot of are carjacking. So it might appear to, when you hear about a carjacking that occurred, and then you start asking particular questions. So this carjack happened at 3 o'clock in the morning at a particular intersection with particular individuals, and then when we get those warrants that we're requested to sign, and you wonder, well, why in the world was this person out at the Shell gas station at 3 a.m. Asking a young girl for directions to get fried chicken? Like, it just doesn't add up. And so what happens is that obviously there's something that goes wrong or something that goes on in the course and scope of what they're attempting to receive from that girl. And these people are so empowered that they will call the police. So you are pretty bold when you've got a child that you are attempting to solicit sex from, and that it doesn't necessarily go to your benefit, i.e. she demands either to be compensated, and you are not going to compensate her because she is a child and you're telling her to get out of the car and she's taking certain matters into her own hands, or at that point she is asking to be brought to a different location by your vehicle. And so there's a lot of stories that are coming to us that just don't add up. That you've been carjacked, but at the same time, you're in this location at this particular time with this child at this age that's in your vehicle. What's going on? With the boys, we're seeing a lot of what they call mules in terms of trafficking of drugs in the French Quarter. Those are more the cases that I've had with young men, where they are brought in, they come in, out-of-town runaways, out-of-state runaways, that they're coming in while they're here in New Orleans. They are being brought to the French Quarter, and they are the ones that are walking around, and they have the ability, you either smell the marijuana that they're smoking, they're showing it off, or something's happening, and they make that transaction. So we're seeing those boys that come in more often in that category. I would say that the boys are there, but once again, to have them come forward, and to say that we are being trafficked, that doesn't happen nearly as often. And that's why we have to create a safe haven. And I would also agree with Ms. Carruth that there are not a lot of resources for juveniles. There are not a lot of safe houses. I know that Covenant House is one location, but you have to remember that too, a lot of these places are voluntary. So they go to Covenant House, we have the issue of possible them running away. So there is a need for greater resources for these kids as well, so that they do feel that there is a safe place. We often ask the city for respite care. Is there ability to have just a bed where you can take these children that you believe are being victimized, and then you can give them a safe spot where they're not going to be questioned by law enforcement? Sometimes they just don't want to answer the questions. If we're talking about the fact that they've been given drugs, they have been not given sleep, they have been not given proper food, they don't have proper clothing. So number one, if you get a child that's never been trafficked, that you get a child that's never been in this environment, and they're hungry, or they're angry, or they're lonely, or they're tired, or they have any of those factors, they're not going to talk. So then when you expect a child who you believe is a victim to then come forward, then want to talk to law enforcement, that is going to be very difficult. So respite care and a respite ability or a respite bed is very important, I believe, for both girls and boys.
On the sex trafficking end, I would say the majority of victims are female. I would think in the past 18 months, I think our office has only received 2 potential complaints about young males being trafficked, which shows you that the majority of sex trafficking is female. However, on the labor trafficking end, the majority of your labor victims are male, and I know Workforce Commission at the state is working with that very heavily now, because we have had complaints and we have done investigations before where you find that everyone, say, in the kitchen or behind like those convenience stores that sell like deli food, and if you go in the back, there's storerooms, they're cooks. They may all be foreign nationals, or they may all be younger boys, or if you go up North Louisiana where you're talking about still farming, your farm laborers are usually male. So in that environment, you're going to find more males than female. But what we're encountering more here in New Orleans, and of course I think Sherry could speak to it better, is there are young males being trafficked. There are young males being used for criminal offenses, which is still a form of trafficking, to traffic drugs. And there are a lot of males being trafficked for sex, but proportionally, the amount of young women being trafficked is drastically higher. But I think Sherry could probably speak to that too.
Sure. Right. So let me add that I think the reason why that a lot of people assume that males are not predominantly a victim when it comes to sex trafficking is because we as a community society has sent the message that men can only be perps, not victims. And so they don't usually speak up about their experiences. And only through talking to them one-on-one, when you really get into their history, while they mentioned, so Dad kicked me out, I was walking down the street, and this man came along, and I had to have sex with him in order to have food to eat that night or somewhere to sleep, that you do realize that they've been victimized, maybe not in the same way as standing on the corner, but we do have those in the quarter where you have juveniles standing outside of certain bars and clubs that are soliciting sex to older men. The transgender community, another very underserved population. Also, a lot of times due to discrimination, by the time they're 13, 14, and they know that they want to transition to another gender, and they're not able to do that for financial reasons, and they're already being rejected from home, they're already having problems at school and being bullied throughout the community, they oftentimes find themselves by the age of 14, 15, 16 selling sex. So, and that does make them, under the age of 18, a victim, a survivor of human trafficking, because no child should be used for sexual pleasure.
Well, we're having a rich discussion, and so I'm going to do some quick questions before we begin to wrap it up. Agent Corolla, can you tell us, or any of our panelists who are dealing with the other side of this, what's happening to the pimps?
Well, if we are able to identify a pimp, and unfortunately that all too often requires the cooperation of the victim, we are going to aggressively prosecute that pimp. A lot of times with human trafficking cases, if it involves an adult victim, we pretty much have to have that cooperation from the victim. The victim has to be willing to testify. If it's a child victim, we don't necessarily need that cooperation because we don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. But if it's an adult victim, we do have to prove that force, fraud, or coercion. And I would say most victims are not going to be willing to confront that pimp in court and testify against him.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond to that?
I think what Agent Corolla said is correct, and what we find very often is even if they are willing to communicate, to get themselves out, to go to Covenant House, to go to Eaton House, to try to get free, they're still not, they've been intimidated, they're scared, they're still not very often willing to give up the information for you to go and get the pimp.
Can I just add something really quick? That we focus a lot on the trafficker, and I wish the focus was more on the customers, because without the demand, there would be no need for supply.
Right, and I'll just add that the customers, especially in the juvenile cases, are so empowered that they will come to court, testify under oath in regard to stories that just really don't add up. And so I think it's really a message to send about really stopping what we know is happening in the community. People are freely willing and able to get these kids. They use the internet, they use back pages, they use Craigslist, they use Instagram, they use TikTok, they use Snapchat, they use Facebook, they use all types of methods of social media. And just as the mother said, that these kids do not have to have access to a phone. I can tell you that so many of the kids that come in front of me, and another misconception is that more often than not, the girls who I believe are victims of human trafficking very often test negative for drugs. So drugs, a lot of times what we're dealing with are mental health issues, issues in the home, or also just what they want in the community. Everybody else has nails in a nice purse. I want that. Everybody else has a new backpack. I want that. Everybody else doesn't have to, and we have to look at just society and what the messages we're sending to the kids in New Orleans. It takes a child who attends the public school system, some of them who have to attend one school in one area, and it takes from 6 a.m. in the morning until 8 a.m. to get to school. So if it's going to take me 2 hours to ride on a school bus with a bunch of other kids where it's not, or if I got somebody that's sitting right here at the corner and they're offering to give me and all of my girlfriends a ride to school, what are we going to take? And so that's how easily some of these girls get caught up. Some of them coerce with other friends. I'm with my friend, oh, that's my boyfriend, he's paying more attention to you. So the two girls get into it where I've got a simple battery case that's coming in front of me, and I'm wondering, well, who are y'all fighting over? Who's this kid? Oh, well, he's not really in school with us. And then you start asking other questions. So they're fighting over 19, 20, 21-year-old man. So my question to the district attorney is, well, where is he? Why are we having a case that I've got two young ladies that have been arrested and been detained, pulled out of school, and then the schools are pushing them out immediately as soon as they come in, and I understand the school's point too. They come in, things are happening, they're immediately expelled from the school or asked to attend another school. So no longer do we maybe have the social worker who may have known some of the dynamics of what's going on with these children. So it's an effort of where we really start to talk about this, a real issue. This is a real epidemic that is affecting our community, but also sharing of information so that I have an idea of what's going on in that child's life before that child got in front of me. And so I think that's really part of what the problem is that to be able to identify in the lines of who's a victim and who actually is a perpetrator and who is the customer, and telling these children that we're going to treat you with kid gloves and we are going to give your voice an opportunity to be heard, and we're going to protect you from those people. But not where that same person is empowered enough to come to court and testify on their own behalf, make a claim with their insurance company for the damage to their vehicle when they know good and well what was going on, what was happening in the streets, what they were doing out there at that community, but nobody is asking those tough questions.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Judge is correct. I actually, as she's speaking, I was thinking of this same case with my daughter where the person that recruited her into human trafficking, and this person was the one that was extorting us for money. And she was using a case that had she was getting information from our daughter, and she was trying to use that information to extort us. And I remember someone saying, asking me, was I on drugs? And I was like, no, I'm not a drug addict. So they was making my daughter tell all these lies, and it was so many lies that they believed it. And when someone meet me and say, are you this person's parent? I'm like, yes. Oh, I thought you was on drugs. I thought you was dead. My daughter was saying all type of mean things about me. And we sit up here and we look at these people that's actually coercing these kids, and we really don't do much of nothing to stop them. But they tearing my life apart right now. It's happening right now. They're tearing my life apart, and there's nothing I can do. They can slander me in the media, and they have. I have proof they slander me in the media, me and my family. So I asked the officer, I was like, well, what can we do? I even asked the lawyer. I was like, what can I do? Well, they don't have any, this would be civil. There's nothing you can do. They don't have any money, so what you're going to sue them for? It's not about suing them. It's to stop them from telling these lies, because that's the misconceptions. They want to make us look like we're bad guys or bad parents, and we aren't, because I'm a testament of that.
Thank you.
And then the last thing we have to remember is pimps don't look like they did in the movies anymore.
Yeah.
They're
That's
females. It's becoming very, very common, and it's troubling how many females are now pimping females.
Yes.
They're older ladies, and these girls start to look up to them. They're on one hand, they're the mother figure, but on the other hand, they're the person that's out there pimping these children. And a lot of times, some of these men look, you hate to say it, they look just like the dean.
Yeah, they look like everybody. Like Mr. Corolla.
And they wear a suit by day,
like
and they just had a court case like that. They just had a very recent case where prominent members of the community were trafficking this little 15-year-old girl.
Saw that.
Yeah.
Grown man, very respectful, bringing her around to his other grown married male friends.
Did you all
and
see
the
that?
kid was 15. You know, so it's hard to know who the pimp is, and you can't blame a 15-year-old for thinking, if I say that this is the man, I'm pointing at you, but if I say that this is the person, I'm the troubled runaway, this is a respected member, nobody's going to believe me.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Thank you. Final question before we do closing remarks for anyone on the panel. What should we do if we suspect that trafficking is occurring around us, or that we have a trafficking victim amongst us and we want to help as non-professionals with the expertise that you all have?
I would say, as a non-professional, the first thing you need to do is, if you can, if you're that close around the victim, that you can ask a few more little pointed questions to get a little bit more information, get it. But if not, there's a line. The FBI has a call-in line. HSI has a call-in line. The materials outside have the numbers to call.
And it's behind
There's
you.
a see something, say something. Don't ever approach a victim if you think the pimp could be somewhere nearby, if you think she might go back and tell him, because y'all are not trained for that.
Correct.
But if you have a school counselor, if it's happening here on campus, I'd alert the school security so they know to look for the cars that's being picked up. They can look at the cars picking her up, get those license plates, forward them over to the FBI, to ATC, to state police, to whoever, and they can then put those into a system that they all share that'll let everybody know, hey, this is a potential pimp without you ever endangering yourself. But if you're a school counselor and you have the ability, or if you're the girl's friend and you have the ability to start asking questions like, what's going on with you? Where are you staying now? And they start telling you, I moved in with him and I live with this guy and these 3 other girls, things like that, then report it to whoever you can. The biggest key is to report it. But if a victim starts really talking to you, then you start giving her direction on where to go. So when you start referring them to the social workers and the covenant houses and the Eaton houses and the places and law enforcement, the places they can go to escape, but don't ever put yourself in a dangerous position.
Thank you. I think now is a good time because the commissioner is going to have final remarks. If we can start with our closing remarks from the panel, the commissioner is going to give closing remarks. We have one quick video we'd like to close out with. Judge Bates, I'm going to start on your end.
Okay, hi. Well, thanks again for the opportunity. Obviously, I think it's very important that we share information. I think it's important that the bench comes forward in terms of when we feel that things obviously just don't feel right. Becomes very difficult for me as an elected official and a person that is supposed to make all of you all feel safer in New Orleans to sometimes wear 2 hats. So when you see certain crimes that are on television, and we've heard a lot about the rash and car break-ins and car burglaries and carjackings, and so everybody really presses down that, we need to be very hard and serious about those matters. But, understand that we have to take the cases as we see them, and that every day, if I have the opportunity to save a child and to be of benefit and to stop this really horrible epidemic that is facing our city, then we are doing what we can. And that is to really be involved and to be careful. When you think that you need to call the police and there's something that you think really doesn't add up, but there are other issues or there are other factors that you see, talk to law enforcement, talk to those kids, and be mindful of if there's something that you may be able to help out with, talk to school officials, talk to counselors, but certainly talk to your children, talk to the kids in your community about the dangers and awareness and how easily something like this can happen, and that it doesn't always look like, just like how Juana said, the pimp that's on television. I mean, sometimes these are very good-looking, savvy people, well-spoken, that come from our neighborhoods, come from their community, and it's not always somebody that you feel that you should be afraid of. And so just to be mindful and to talk and to really communicate about this is happening, there are resources, and that also you are willing to listen.
Oh, thank you. First and foremost, I want to say for myself, unfortunately, I was playing vigilante only because I didn't have a choice, and that may be dangerous. So I would say you have to be vigilant. You have to observe these behaviors. The signs are there. You may not be able to recognize them, but hopefully from this symposium today that you guys can walk out with this knowledge because it's happening. And I just hate to talk from experience. I really wish I wouldn't have had to learn this way, but it happened. So make sure that you observe everything that's going on. Even I don't even let my girls go out to other people's homes because I don't know what's going on in their homes, as first and foremost. And my daughter was one of the kids, oh, this is happening, I want to go over here, I want to do all these things. And she don't realize that I'm trying to save her only because, like you said, everything is based on funds and a lack of resources that we don't have. So I'm trying to add that extra protective this to our life, and she wasn't willing to accept that. So now we are stuck with this situation. So we can't just be judgmental to everybody's situation because I don't have time to explain my whole life story to you guys of what's happening. This is only a snippet of it. So just educate yourself, bring awareness, see something, say something, like the commissioner said, see something, say something. I had the opportunity, thank you, God, for giving me the opportunity to meet with some of these great minds because they want to make it work. But like we keep saying, there is no funding. And I was asking the judge today, what do a parent do when they're in crisis? I don't want to hear you talk about legal stuff. I want to know what to do. I'm in crisis. Help me. And that's what I was crying for. I was crying. I'm watching a video of my child being assaulted live on social media. So this is the thing. I'm in crisis. I don't want to hear your legal stuff. I want to know, what can we do? What can we do? But we're not going to understand until we put in this situation. And I don't want anyone in this room to be put in this situation, because it's a horrible feeling.
Again, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here to share information about HSI, my role as a VAS, and human trafficking. I thank each of you for your presence here and for your interest. And now that you have more information, I encourage you and invite you to share that information with others so that they can be more aware. And the more that we become aware, the more that we can do something about this crisis in our community. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. John.
Thank you for having me today. I hope that everyone learned a little bit more about human trafficking today. I hope that we were able to dispel some myths about human trafficking, because I think there are more myths out there than actual truths. But the biggest thing is, please take what you've learned today, and if you see something, say something. Most victims of human trafficking will not self-identify. Most victims of human trafficking will not ask for help. I think as a community, we have to do that for them. So if you see something, say something. If you want to call the FBI, if you want to call HSI, if you want to call ATC, all those hotlines are available. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is always available. It's a 24/7 hotline. It's an easy number to remember, 888-3737-888. And you can be anonymous when you report it, and they will provide that information to law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, inviting me today, and thank you for everybody coming out. I would just encourage everybody to continue to educate yourself more on human trafficking. See what you can do in your community, in your school, in your church, at your local homeless shelters, to assist survivors, because I always say that after they're out is when their extraordinary journey really starts and begins. They have all of this trauma to get through. They have new lives to build, and that's not easy. So whatever you can do to assist in your community, to work directly with the survivors, I encourage you to do.
Thank you for having me as well. I hope that everyone here has learned, as many of us have already said, some red flags and ways to identify victims. And that there's outside a lot of information as well that you can take with you if you don't remember all the hotlines and things to contact if you see something. Please say something. As well, not just strangers, but those close and dear and near to you. You can also recognize these things in your family members as well. Seek out mental health resources if you feel that that's an issue. Isolation is an issue as well. If you notice that there's any changes that's going on, those near and dear to you, as well as family members as well, and strangers as well. So I hope that today that everyone has gained some knowledge of how to identify, have become aware, and please become involved in any activity or symposiums or community-led things that's going on for you all to get more educated on the matter. Thank you.
Okay. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today and for staying here and giving us your undivided attention. I believe that one of the main things we can do is what we've done today. We've taken the first step. We've educated another group of people who can now go out and educate others. I'd like you to think about the fact that if you are in the healthcare industry, in law enforcement, in the hospitality industry, if you've ever worked in a casino, hotel, if you've ever been to the French Quarters, if you're a teacher on a college campus, odds are you have already passed a victim at some point in your day-to-day life. For me, I have the wake-up call because I can actually see faces that I know now were probably victims. Every time I hear the word they're bringing girls in out of Tennessee, I cringe because I can see some of those faces. Everyone didn't have the opportunity to have sat on a bench and missed the calling. But if you're in any of those industries, what I asked you to do is now educate your coworkers. If your boss is willing, call ATC, call HSI, get some presentation materials, bring the materials back to work. The more people we educate along the way, the more likely we are to start saving victims and to start stopping this beforehand. And so I'm going to end with a little mini success story. One of ATC's awareness programs is we designed something for the industry. I do regulate the alcohol and tobacco industry, so it is kind of hard for people to tell us no when I say we'd like to come do a presentation. So we developed a presentation that is geared strictly toward hotel and border casinos, and we started in Shreveport and Lake Charles because, like I said, we are a trafficking corridor, and they do bring them in from Louisiana to Texas and vice versa. And about a month ago, I had my agent that does presentations go sit up in the Golden Nugget an entire day, passing out materials, showing videos, training the employees as they came in, just spotting the signs and calling security. That's all we really need. These are some of the signs. And a week and a half ago, or maybe that was last week, we actually had an incident at the Golden Nugget where they were trafficking some young girls through the Nugget. They had fake IDs. They were pushing them through the casino and the bars. The IDs looked legitimate. They didn't stop them on the IDs. A couple of the employees was watching the whole scenario and said, this does not look right. They called state police. State police went in there. Sure enough, those girls were 16, 17. They were not the 21 that was on the thing. And they were being trafficked by a female pimp. When they got them, they were like, what are you waiting for? Their ride was a female pimp, and she was moving them from Texas. And they were 3 little girls, and state police did its job and got them out of there, and now they're getting help. I don't know that my agent's materials helped. I like to think that they did, but that's what just educating the public on the signs can do. So that one call got 3 little girls out of what could have been, detrimental. So just remember that. Just looking for the signs and making a call, if that's all it is. See something, say something. You never know what the result can be. Thank you all for listening to all of us.
Dr. DeGrew reminded me that we were going to invite the audience, and we have just a few minutes before we have to end. Did anyone in the audience have a question that they'd like to ask the panel? Can you pass it down for me? And while we're passing that down, I would just like to thank Commissioner Maureen Lombard, and I know that I'm not alone in extending appreciation to you and your division for your dedication and commitment to addressing this issue. I also want to thank you for raising the community's awareness on the topics, as it is touching so many lives, personally and professionally. We extend our gratitude to your boss, Governor John Bell Edwards, for his commitment to proactively combating trafficking in our communities. And thanks to all of the panelists for taking time from your busy schedules to educate the Delgado family and other community partners. I want to thank Dr. William Wainwright for his ongoing support of students, and I would be remiss if I did not thank my execution and planning partners, Dr. Teresa DeGrew, raise your hand, and Gilda Ebanks. There's Gilda Ebanks. Help me thank them, you guys. The 3 of us would also like to extend our appreciation to the faculty and staff and students who are here, those who submitted questions, and those who are watching via live stream, especially our colleagues. Bob, are they still there from South Louisiana Community College? Here's a shout out to Slick. When they heard about the symposium, they emailed and asked if we would be able to stream it to them. Obviously, they couldn't drive in and drive back out from Lafayette. And we will have it on YouTube so that other people can watch it as well. Our goal was to provide a forum that would be both respectful and informative on this topic, because it is such a heavy lift, being such a serious topic, but all of you on the panel played a very major role in making that a reality for us this morning. I was going to add, just to highlight what the panelists are saying about how all of us can be touched by this topic, and I'm going to just share something with you from just my personal life that happened. In my email to the faculty and staff, I said to you that I really first learned about human trafficking. Of course, I heard about it, but had my own first interaction with it when one of the agents from Homeland Security called me because one of our Delgado students was involved in it. And we needed to make some adjustments. He is, I don't know if I can acknowledge him because he's here in this room, but he was advocate for helping this student. She was an outstanding student, a young girl with 2 parents here in the New Orleans community who were professionals, just like Juanita and the judge are saying. She was a student on one of our campuses, and we needed to make some adjustments for him to help her. A few months later, I live in a very small subdivision, probably 20 houses. I myself witnessed a young girl being trafficked at midnight across the street from my house on French Quarter Festival weekend, just as they say, a very busy weekend here in the city. And then, a few months after that, I attended the panel that was mentioned, and I had the opportunity to meet Juanita. And she touched me so deeply that day that I went up to talk with her after, and I found out that she had been a Delgado student, which you guys know means a lot to me. And so I want you to imagine that I'm just one little bitty person, and in a matter of maybe 6 or 7 months, I had 3 incidents, 3 run-ins that forced me to deal with the human trafficking situation. And so that, I hope, highlights for you that it is real, it is in all of our lives, and we have to be advocates for these students. Please stop by the tables on your way out. Help me thank these panelists again. We can't thank you enough. And if I can, I'm going to do 2 real quick questions. What training is available for high schools? I think they mean maybe teachers and counselors and what have you who work with high school students.
There are multiple programs out there. I know on the Children's Cabinet there are a couple of programs that are being designed for that, and ATC actually has a program designed for teachers and counselors and high school students, but Ms. Carruth is actually correct on that. That is like the biggest hesitation, and we are not getting into the schools. We have put out there, I've talked to Middle School Principals Association, we have put it out there that we have these programs. I think, you know, it's like when domestic violence first started, I always compare it to that, and that, not that it's the same, but it's just hidden, and people don't want to wake up and talk about those harsh realities, and they don't want you talking to their 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds about it. But there are multiple programs, and I'm sure the HSI programs probably adapted to be taught in schools, but we are just getting no traction right now with schools allowing us in. Universities are starting to welcome us. We've done 3 university panels, I think, in the past month and a half.
Nice.
But high schools, we are just not getting the traction. It's out there. We've got a whole program designed specifically targeted to that group, but you can't kick a door down if they won't let you.
We've got somebody in the audience I want you to talk to. Another one, really quick for maybe Dr. Chapman or someone. What about the children that are in child protective services? Or anyone who can address that question? I'm not sure.
Can I address?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, I can answer that too.
Regarding their vulnerability to trafficking?
That's just the question. What about the children that are in child protective services, I guess?
So, not much has changed since when I was in foster care. So it's not like the Hollywood movies where you're placed in the golden dream family and and life goes on, right? No, I know personally I was placed in over 25 placements. Wasn't able to stay attentive in school long enough to learn anything, much less make friends. By the time I was 13 years old, you know, sometimes the parents were worse than the ones they removed you from. And a lot of kids that are in foster care go, especially when they're placed in group homes that are monitored by staff, and they don't have that one-on-one care or that family, that basic normalcy. They get lost in the system, not just in the living situation, but their education situation, and having any sort of support. And sometimes what the street has to offer is much more learn, and surprisingly feels much more safer.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
I was going to say, for children being in foster care, it's not really a better situation because I think they will run even more so if they're in foster care. My daughter personally was there temporarily for a week, and she ran 3 times, and all 3 times I was able to retrieve her. And I remember before this even happened, I was like, listen, I'm trying to get some help. What can I do to get this help? And I remember a representative from DCFS told me that if I give her up to the state, I will be charged with neglect and abandonment. And that's not what I was trying to do. So just because they're in foster care doesn't mean that is the best outcome for them. It's not the best outcome because it's only so much that they can do. And to be honest with you, they haven't did such a great job. So that's why I think that we need to bring these solutions. And everybody's overworked. I know everybody on this panel and up in here is overworked. But this is our kids. And in our future, if you truly believe your kids are the future, you have to do any and everything in your power. And like I said again, I'm a testament to that. So that's why I'm here.
Last question is for Dr.
I'll just add to that,
Sure.
From 2015 to 2018, 66% of the confirmed cases that were confirmed trafficking victims, all of those children were in the custody of their parents. So it's a real big misconception that a lot of these kids are in state's custody. A lot of these kids are right at home with mom and dad, and they're still in the home. So it's out there.
Let's do this one last question for Dr. Chapman before we part. Dr. Chapman, as a part of ICE, how do you work to dispel the fear that victims/survivors may have when interacting with your office? Are there protections in place for victims so that they are not deported and further traumatized?
Thank you for that question. So that is actually a part of our awareness, and we work closely with community partners who serve immigrant communities. But yes, there is immigration relief available to individuals who are victims of crime, because that's one of the ways that a trafficker will control a person, through threat of deportation or threat of being reported to ICE. But there is immigration relief that's available for those who are victims of crime, and we can request that immigration relief on behalf of that individual to remove that fear of being deported.
Thank you. We have some other questions, and I'd like to get the answers for them. I'm going to see if there's a way that I can send them in writing to our panelists, and maybe they can respond to them, and we can post them somewhere for students and faculty and staff of someone who asked. This concludes our session today. We're right on time. I heard somebody's phone go off at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, 12 o'clock,
Right?
yeah.
I did it. Yay! Thank you guys for attending again. Thank you, panelists. We have some gifts for our panelists that we want to give before you all leave. If you don't mind, I'm going to bring it to them.
Can I bring it to him?
Because Dr. Carter has to go.